Hi, I'm Tracy Teal. My pronouns are she, her, and today is December 16th, 2024. And I am super excited to be here for my first time as a host of the Open Source Stories. And I'd like to welcome you with our guest, Hadley Wickham. Hadley, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Hadley Wickham, he, him. I am the chief scientist at Posit, where my job, amongst other things, is to make R packages that make data science more accessible, faster, and more fun.
Great. So yes, tidyverse is definitely something that I feel like, people have heard about and know you for. And I know something that you're working on right now and thinking about is the history of tidyverse and what the different things and elements of your life contributed to the tidyverse. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm having some fun writing this up. It's a combination of fun and like, oh my God, it's like 20 years of stuff to work on. But hopefully by this time the podcast is out, I can give you a link to share so people can read the full thing. But yeah, one of the things I've been reflecting about is kind of like, how did my parents kind of influence the tidyverse? Because I think it's fairly obvious how my dad influenced it, because like I was having conversations with him at like, I don't know, age 15 about like relational database design and Cod's third normal form. And I think you see like a lot of that influence kind of come into tidy data and tidyr and so on. And just, we always he had a computer at home from a very early age. I was lucky enough to be able to start programming pretty young. But I've been trying to think more about like how my mum has influenced it. And I think somehow what I got from her is this like, I guess like sort of bystander intervention for like when something is going wrong in someone else's life, to have that kind of confidence to be able to like go and offer a helping hand. I mean, one place I noticed, one habit I picked up from her concretely is like whenever I'm like at a like visiting someone that has like a stack of cards or papers laid out, like I always pick them up and like line them all up so they look neat and then put them back down again, which is absolutely a habit I got from my mom. But just that kind of, there's certainly like this sort of some level of sort of arrogance to like the tidyverse and tidy data, like saying, oh, like I've come up with this better way to do things and I think you should use it. And I don't know, I kind of like struggle with that a little bit, because in some ways it definitely feels kind of like arrogant and pushy, but on the other hand, it's definitely like I know, like I know this is like, I know in my heart of hearts this is the right way for you to be doing this, and like I want to make sure you're living the life that you could be living.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, I think especially like that bystander framing of, it's easy to think that people are okay and just walk by and not like offer to help. And yeah, there is some kind of like arrogance of like, I know better, or you don't seem okay. But it does seem really important to try, and also really difficult, because if you're wrong, right, there's an element of shame, like, oh my gosh, they didn't really need it. And so you kind of have to keep putting yourself back out there by like offering to help. And then, yeah, some people might not. And that's still true, right? Not everybody loves the tidyverse.
But yeah, it kind of reminds me of, do you remember have you heard of like this Good Samaritan study?
Yeah.
Where they like invited people to like give a lecture on being a good Samaritan, and they kind of staged it so on the way to give the talk they found like they came across someone who was like passed out, And then they kind of like the actual experiment was whether or not they like intervened with this person on the way to giving a talk about being a good Samaritan. And that's how I remember. I don't know if that's how you remember it.
I think I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I think about it because I was a first aid responder, so ski patrol, EMT trained. And so an area in my life where I stop is when people are hurt or I see people like struggling in the water because I was a lifeguard. And I sort of just like can't not stop. And I recognize that sometimes, people are like, I'm fine, leave me alone. But I think maybe what's also there is like, I don't do that all the time. It's maybe just because I have some knowledge or some training in that space that I feel like I have enough knowledge to be able to help. So I also wonder if there's something around like, I feel like I can be involved because I've learned a lot, because I have some confidence in this area that I feel like I know enough to try to be helpful. And I wonder if for you, like that combination of your mom and your dad of having those early experiences with computers, and then your mom just kind of being a person that will like go, help someone else, like straighten the papers or like help run the meeting, bring in the chairs, like that combination of things prepared you in particular to sort of jump in with data and statistics.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I sort of think about is like evangelism, like both in the sense of like, people being an evangelist for the tidyverse, but also like, being an evangelist in the sense of like a Christian evangelist and, telling people that they're going to like burn in hell for eternity if they don't believe in your specific religion. Like there's some sort of interesting tension between like how much like can you help other people when they like don't like there's definitely like there's a really powerful side to like evangelism in terms of helping people, but it can also be like really unwelcome and like judgmental. And I think that's like one of the things I've always like tried to strive with the tidyverse is like I think the tidyverse is awesome and I think you should use it, but there's like zero judgment to using anything else. Like use the tidyverse and use Baser, use tidyverse and data table. Like I don't care. Like I want to help you be as successful as you possibly can, but I also accept that there's like tons of other ways for you to be successful without my help.
Yeah, I wonder if that's about like inviting people to try it versus saying you must do this. Like the phrase, maybe the way you evangelize. Is it more about? I mean, in some sense, is it more about fear or love? Like, am I trying to scare you into using this, or am I trying to like, I don't know, share the love I have for this? And those are both motivating factors, and fear is often one that seems more motivating, but that like leaning into that that love and that not a scarcity mindset, like I think, I don't know, I just really, that's so important to me. And I feel like, especially, as we go forward, that kind of framing, I feel like there's just so much fear. And so it's the other messaging is nice to see. I mean, it always goes one way or another, but there are, I think, different ways of evangelizing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to kind of bring it back to being a lifeguard, like my attitude of the tidyverse is always like, come on in, the water's fine. Like if you, just try it out. Like if you don't like it, get out of the pool and go somewhere else. But maybe you'll come in and have a great time and meet some friends, and that's awesome. But it's also awesome, like if you don't use it, like no skin off my back.
But I do really like what you're saying of both the influence of your mom and your dad, because I think sometimes the influences that we notice and call out are more obvious, like the more obvious ones, but those ones around, let's say, like quote unquote soft skills, are the ones that are very impactful. And something like we've talked about is that if you build it, they will come is just not true.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
And so those complementary, like I will build it, but then also what are the other pieces that are important?
I will build it, and I will tell people about it. And then maybe they'll come. I think that was sort of interesting to me because, like, especially like early in my career when I was still in academia, and like marketing was like really like a dirty word. Like you shouldn't have to sell your ideas because good ideas somehow like magically like float to the top and percolate into people's consciousness in a way that doesn't jive with any of my experience of the world outside of academia or inside of academia. Like if you want to help people, like you have to make good tools, but people don't just like the tools don't just like spontaneously appear in people's heads for them to like know about. Like you have to then go and tell people about them. And it's I don't know, that always seemed like fairly obvious to me. Like they have an impact. It's kind of a multiplicative effect of like doing good work and then telling people about that work so that they actually know that it exists. And that's always been, something that I've tried to do with my work. And again, kind of going back to like my earlier years, like I think one of the things that really helped me was that I was like a freelance web developer for a few years, for 3 or 4 years maybe. And that having the skills to make websites was just like that's a tremendously powerful skill. And it's something that like, back then you had to be like writing HTML by hand and learning CSS and Java and learning about all the different browsing compatible. Like it's so much more accessible now, but that ability to like know enough about Quarto and GitHub pages or whatever to like turn something that's just on your computer into something that everyone in the world can see, just such a like powerful skill.
Yeah, it is. And I'm wondering if any of those websites are still up. But
that's the kids. I don't think so. No, I'm gonna like.
If they are, we're gonna put links in the comments, right?
I'll tell you, like my first website, the first domain name I bought, which now seems so cringe, was ineffable.co.nz, which I just thought was like so cool at the time, and now I'm like, oh my god, that's like clearly a 18-year-old white man with a superiority complex. Like, God, why would you call it ineffable? God, that's going up. It's gone. It's gone.
Sometimes it's good that things don't stay around forever.
It is. I also, on that note, I also used to think it was cool being like Hadley, like the only Hadley Wickham on the internet. Because like you could Google my name and find out, and now I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to have a few other like Hadley Wickhams for some like plausible deniability.
Security through obscurity.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I think it's interesting what you're saying about the websites because you are saying, oh, you needed to know HTML and CSS, and those were my early days too. But the other thing about a website is the content, right? In fact, like now, if you're making a website, like if you make a website in Quarto, it's pretty easy to stand up a website, but the content, that's a whole other story, right? And so it's interesting, like that process of creating websites was the code, but also the communication and the design, like kind of human centeredness of this is designed for humans. How are they going to use it? What needs to be there? I think both of those are important to learn. And that's, I would say like human-centered design, I think is just such an interesting concept that I actually, now that I'm thinking about, like you really incorporate into what you do and is itself a whole field of study.
I think I kind of got lucky. Like another one is like things that seem so weird in hindsight. But when I was doing my PhD, I taught like the statistical computing class at Iowa State. And somehow, like, I'm pretty certain I taught it with like zero supervision from any faculty because I got given, like, I remember I got given like this course syllabus, which I can't remember anything about, except there was also like a box of rocks that came with it because one of the homeworks was like measuring the weights of rocks, and I was like, this is not statistical computing. This is like terrible. And then I just like completely created my own syllabus without any oversight. And that was just so useful. Like just doing like I think the other thing I learned from that course is like that was where I learned like the way I think about R is like okay, start with like vectors. And then once you know vectors, then you can learn about matrices, and you can learn about data frames, and you can learn about lists, and you can learn about functions. And now, like 10 weeks after that, now you can create a plot. And by which point, like everyone's lost interest. And that's what really, like I found really like teaching is just such an incredible opportunity to get like feedback on what you're doing and to like forces you to confront like how your ideas about the world or what people think might be like completely incorrect. And and I think going on at like Rise, where I taught the data science, what we would now call data science, for 4 years to a bunch of students, like that was just so helpful in terms of like oh, like the way I think about things is very different to the way the majority of the world thinks about things. And if I want to have an impact, like I have to teach people a little bit about how to think like me, but I also have to like bring my ideas and like present them in a way that people can actually understand. That doesn't just make sense to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do love that tidyverse started in reaction to being handed a box of rocks. That's
Yeah.
I mean, I just love that. I mean, I do like those kinds of things of using rocks or other things to demonstrate different ideas, but the box of rocks and computing is an
Yeah.
interesting contrast. But I do love what you said, and this is something that I saw in one of your kind of where you're compiling ideas for about tidyverse is the role of teaching in software development, because it does really force you to explain your ideas and see how it lands, right? Like that iteration, or like you write a package and you share it and you think it works, but really watching someone try to use it, teaching them how to use it informs so much about the package itself and the documentation, right? And I just think that's such an like something we probably could do more of. I mean, especially with now virtual being such an option, to gather, a workshop of 10 people and try to teach something, right? Like any new package, the first thing you have to do is go teach it to 10 people or five people, right? And I kind of have been interested in like making that easier to spin up. Like I wonder what the barriers are to doing things like that. I mean, it's obviously hard and a lot of prep. So thinking about it as something valuable is obviously one of the first challenges to overcome. But then I wonder if there are other ways to sort of reduce the barrier to doing that for open source projects, especially like communities where like at Posit, yes, or you could put out a call and it'd be pretty easy to get 5 people to come to something. But I wonder what that looks like and how we could think about teaching as a way of essentially product development.
Yeah, but that also sort of all ties in with this like promoting your work and kind of growing your community, because once you, and I think again that's like so much easier to do on like social media now than it was 20 years ago, especially now that we have Blue Sky and the RStats hashtag seems to be kind of back and people are having fun again. There's just so many ways to kind of like get the word out about what you're doing and find, like, you don't need to find thousands of people, you don't need to find hundreds of people, you just need to find like 4 or 5 people who really appreciate what you're doing, and then
Yeah.
you know, listen to them. And that's like tremendously like motivating because it helps you, you know, keep working on this stuff for potentially years, or in my case, decades. And you get that like feedback, like what's working, what's not working, what are other kind of related problems. Yeah, and it's just like fun to work with those people and help them, you know, solve their problems.
I think that is really valuable. I think it's also sometimes hard to listen in the sense that you don't always get positive feedback.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean, and also just, you know, someone, the same message communicated by different people lands differently, right? There's more risk
yeah,
to different types of people
yeah,
communicating publicly
yeah,
than others. And as you
yeah,
mentioned, you have some privilege there, and more so as you've been in the space longer. But I wonder what you've learned about, and so like let's not negate that. Like I think
yeah,
that's really
yeah,
an important thing, and important around creating safe spaces
yeah.
for people to share and listen. And I wonder what you've learned about listening and receiving feedback that is not really feedback that you wanted to hear.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what helps you through those times?
I mean, it's sort of interesting because this kind of comes back to kind of this like bystander intervention again. That sometimes like your intervention is like not needed or not welcomed, and it isn't successful. And it's a weird, like you have to have this weird, you have to be in a state where you can, like, I think some of like, I have just always had this like very strong belief in like certain parts of the tidyverse are like right, not like based on any evidence, but just based on like my feeling. And then, you know, ignore, sometimes you have to ignore feedback because people don't fully get what you're trying to do, or they maybe you're a little bit too far ahead and you need to pull it back a little bit. So, but this is a combination. But like, if all you do is just chase after this like beautiful vision that's in your head, like that can also take you to like really terrible places as well. So there's like combination of like both listening and like staying true to your vision. And you know, I think the like to me a lot of it's like I'm going to go in this direction and I'm going to kind of ignore what people are saying maybe for a little while, accepting that I might be totally wrong, but I need to keep going in this direction a while to like figure things out. So some of it is maybe not like the like how you listen to feedback to me, but maybe how often. Like it's something that you don't want to be like listening to too much feedback every day because they can just kind of push you in all these different directions and you end up going nowhere. But you do want to be like checking in regularly to make sure you are actually heading somewhere useful.
Yeah. Well, and the patience there of I need to keep working on this for a while, even though people don't believe in it yet, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's I mean, I think that's really important and hard. And some of that comes from that confidence of like this is the right thing, and believing in yourself and what you know about your community. And I think that's probably something that we could all be better, or not be better about, because that makes it seem like a should because it's a hard
yeah,
thing, is like to
yeah,
give ourselves that grace, um and to give our like we would to somebody else, right? Like if we were
yeah,
talking to a friend and they were like, I have this great idea, and you know, should I keep working on it? You would tell your friend like, yeah, that's a great idea, like keep working on it. I'm here to help you. But we maybe don't tell ourselves that.
yeah.
um so I think
Although, of
that's,
course, like some people, or sometimes you also need to tell people, like, hey, like, this is not a good
yeah,
idea.
that's
Like, we
true.
need to stop and change
You
direction.
need to tell your friend, like, okay, you spent enough time on that. Maybe it's time to try something else. Just a thought.
But I
So
do think
yeah,
on the whole, yeah, I think about this, I don't know, like, one of the things that there's something about, like, I think about this in, like, this is going to come up with, like, in yoga, like, you've, sometimes like, when you've hurt some part of your body, the right thing to do is, like, rest it and leave it alone. And sometimes the right thing to do is like work with it and like stretch it and exercise it a little bit. and you can't always tell like which is the right case. So so some of it I think is about like you have to like try one, and if like you've rested it for a while and it's not getting better, like try doing the other thing. And I think about this like, I don't know, there's a lot of cases where sometimes the right thing to do is to leave it alone, and in other cases the right thing is to intervene, and it's never completely obvious which is which. But if you've tried one and it's not working, try the opposite. Like try leaving it alone or try intervening. Like don't get too stuck in like one approach.
Yeah. So basically, it's hard to know when you're right, but try some things and see what happens.
Yeah, really useful advice. I know.
Just keep running the experiments.
Yeah, just keep. But yeah, it's just so hard because sometimes like it takes a long time to be like, to be successful and to get things right. And there's part of being successful is just like plugging away at these things that no one else like believes in. Yeah. Accepting that no one else might believe like very good reasons, but maybe you do have some unique insight, and maybe it's going to take you a while to get there. But
yeah, so for 2025, start working on a project that no one yet believes in, and then see what happens.
Don't work on it for too long in case it takes you that idea.
But not forever. Not all of 2025.
Yeah, not forever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I especially take that to writing. And I think that's a hard one. And like me personally, I write a lot of Google Docs, as you know, but writing publicly is different. And that for me feels like something that's very risky. Like, how will that be perceived? And am I wrong? Am I right? Yeah. And, but starting those things out doesn't need to be for everybody at once. You could share with 5 people.
Find that like supportive audience that like keeps you going, and that will like
and then we'll give you the feedback.
I mean, you do. I mean, but that's the other thing is like for anything new, like you want to start with your friends and your supporters. Like you don't need to expose like the rawest new form of your ideas to hostile feedback. Like find your supporters, find the people who like you and want you to succeed, and let them give you like helpful, useful feedback to get to somewhere good. Like you don't have to throw yourself and your new idea to the wolves of like the internet who are just might be really cruel to you. Find those supportive people, get encouraged, work on it for a while, stay motivated, and just see where it ends up.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective, and it's good to hear how you've put that into play in your own life. Even starting with that supportive environment of your family. So thank you for sharing all that. As we head into the end of the new year, are you baking anything exciting for the holidays?
I am about to embark on a bunch of like homemade gift projects, edible homemade gifts. Look at my list of things I'm making: smoked nuts on the grill, a hot buttered rum batter, and then a non-alcoholic rum mix for my friends who don't drink. Make a chai tea mix and candied jalapenos. So
that's a good mix.
That may be overly ambitious, but that is what's currently on my list. And we'll see what gets made before Christmas.
It's good to start.
I don't have it. Yeah, but I just finished my Halloween crochet just in time for Christmas. So
that's how most projects go. I've made baby hats that have been done when the baby is 2 years old. So
now that's a lesson I learned about. There's a good lesson there, a connection to package development, I think, because there is also this art. It's just like it's always more fun to start a new project than to finish an old project, and you have to but you still have to finish the old projects and get them done because it doesn't count until they're finished.
True in crochet as well as code. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation with you. It was fun as always. And Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.